Welcome to Tales of Resilience, a podcast honoring the heart behind animal rescue. I'm your host, Jolene Feeney, a mental health therapist, lifelong animal lover, and founder of Zodipaws and Animal Rescue Hub. This is a space for real conversations with the people who care for animals when no one else can. From shelter teams and wildlife rehabbers to transporters, vet techs, and nonprofit leaders. We talk about the joy, the grief, the burnout, and the moments that remind us why we keep showing up. Whether you've lived this work or just want to understand it more deeply, thank you for listening. Let's get into today's story. This episode may include references of animal suffering and death, as well as themes of mental health, including suicide. Welcome to Tales of Resilience. I'm your host, Jolene, and today I'm honored to welcome Noelle Almrud, Director of Operations at Beagle Freedom Project. Beagle Freedom Project is the world's leading organization dedicated to rescuing and rehoming animals used in experimental research while advancing education and legislation to end animal testing. Through their mission, Educate, Legislate, Liberate, they have helped pass landmark laws like the Beagle Freedom Bill and have given thousands of animals a second chance at life. Noelle brings over 20 years of experience in animal welfare, and her journey into the work is one rooted in courage, purpose, and resilience. Noelle, so grateful to have you here, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, very excited. And I have to say, I was listening on an Audible to this book called Rescue Dogs by Pete Paxton. Have you ever heard of it?
I have not.
Yeah, it was really, I don't even think Pete Paxton is actually his real name, but he is an investigator into animal cruelty, and he talks about animals in animal testing. And so I was listening to this, I was getting so excited for our conversation today because there's just so much, I think, to talk about and understand about the world that you guys dip your toes into. And yeah, very excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I'd love to just kind of give you the floor to really share as much as you want to about the Beagle Freedom Project, what you guys do ultimately, and whatever you think would be helpful for people to know and understand.
Sure. So we were founded 15 years ago by Shannon Keith, who is our founder and president, recognizing that there was a need for rescuing animals out of animal testing. And we started with beagles because they are easily identified and they are most commonly coming out of labs, being used in labs for biomedical testing. And so our goal was to get them out of there and get them placed in adoptive homes. Too often we're seeing that these animals are killed after their experimentation ends, and there's really not necessarily a need for that. So if we could work with these laboratories and get these animals out and get them in good homes, it would be tremendous. And so over the past 15 years, we've done that with over, I believe, 3,500 dogs, and we've taken in other animals as well. And then 2 years ago, we had the opportunity of shutting down a lab in Oklahoma, and we turned that property into a sanctuary. It's called Freedom Fields. We now have a space where we can hold dogs and cats that were used in testing and find them new homes. We've also rescued farmed animals from laboratory testing, alpacas and pigs and goats and horses. And now we have over 30 acres to provide them with pasture space so that they can graze and live out their lives after the cruelties that were inflicted on them. So we're really excited to be doing that now.
Yeah, that's really amazing. What a great repurposing of a property that was once used for such terrible things to turn it into something that provides life and I guess, opportunity for these new animals.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really great. So you obviously have an extensive history in this work. Did you grow up with animals, or have animals always been a part of your life? How did you get into this work ultimately?
I think, most people have their family pets. I had dogs and cats growing up, of course. But I was a city girl. I grew up in Houston and had no idea what I wanted to be when I grew up, and then was working in commercial mortgage banking and insurance and realized I'd be happier shoveling animal poo than doing what I was doing. So I went back to school and rededicated my life to helping animals.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because uh, it's a funny sentence, right? To imagine you'd be happier shoveling poo than staying in commercial mortgage banking. So I was kind of curious, like, what was happening inside of you at that time? Like, what did it take to walk away from something that was probably a more stable career? Was this like a slow burn, or was there a defining moment where you're just like, I need to get out? What was that process like for you?
Yeah, I think I traveled a lot for business. And so I always tried to do something after my work, to just kind of explore the United States. And I found myself at animal welfare organizations and realized, maybe this is something that I can do. And so I just looked into it and realized that I could get a second degree and just started off as a caregiver. I went from a very successful career to making $8 an hour caring for animals and, never regretted it once, just
Mm.
really loved what I was doing. And then I think because I had a business background, I kind of realized that my skill set could be used on a bigger scale operationally or running organizations. And so I was working running wildlife sanctuaries and caring for other animals that were used in biomedical research and the exotic pet trade and just realized this was my calling and I was so happy to do it.
Mm. That's amazing. When you found out about the Beagle Freedom Project, one, how did you find out about them? And two, what was that initial introduction like for you to be exposed to a different type of rescue organization, right? Because
Mhm.
this is it's a particularly, especially as far as like who we've talked to at this point. Um, this is a different arm of rescue in some ways. So I'm curious what that's like to be introduced to that and what that experience was like for you.
Sure. So I was running a very large wildlife sanctuary in Texas, and my family relocated to northwestern Montana, which is where I'm living now. And big surprise, there are no sanctuaries in Montana. It's too cold. So I recognized that I needed to kind of change my path. And so I just started looking for other opportunities and saw the position for the director of operations and thought, wow, I can still, impact animals' lives, still, make a difference and, do it from an office or do it from my home working in a remote office. And then to come find out that they had freedom fields and I could still put my skill set to work and helping them, rescue more animals. So I was excited to find the opportunity. In the sanctuary world, we had rescued non-human primates from biomedical research. So I was very familiar with the process and that sort of thing. And now we're rescuing beagles, and I get to love on beagles where you can't love on non-human primates, or you shouldn't be. So this is the best of both worlds.
That's great. Great. Not to divert too much from our conversation, but I'm a born and raised Montana girl. So
Oh wow,
um,
where are you from in Montana?
I was born and raised in Billings and then went to school in Missoula,
Okay, yeah, so I'm in Kalispell.
Kalispell. Very
Yeah.
cool.
We love it here, but it's
Yeah,
cold.
Montana's awesome. Yeah,
Coming from Texas, it's cold.
yeah. Different climate. Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
good. Well, I'm glad you're loving it there.
thank you.
Um, so a lot of times there's misconceptions about the work that is done in animal welfare, rescue. What do you see are some common misconceptions about the Beagle Freedom Project specifically? And then if there's more general, broad misunderstandings that you would love to kind of clear up or kind of address, what would be important for people to kind of really understand?
That's a good question. To be honest, I think Beagle Freedom Project does a great job of explaining exactly who we are and what we do. So to be honest, I haven't seen any misconceptions when it comes to our work. We're very straightforward. We want to end animal testing. We don't want animals to be tested on, and I would say the majority of the public feel that way too. And our work is wholeheartedly behind getting these animals out and providing them with a better life. So I haven't seen any misconceptions when it comes to this
Mhm.
work. If you're talking generally about animal welfare, I think sometimes all organizations get lumped under, you know, crazy exploitations and the things that they do and that sort of thing. And no, we're not about being, I don't even know the word I'm trying to use. Our goal is just to educate the public so that these atrocities do not happen anymore, and getting these animals out and getting them into adoptive homes. And so that's our 100% mission. And I think we do that really well, to be honest. To toot my own horn and this organization's horn, I think we're good at it. And I've always said historically that my job is to put myself out of business so that there's no need for organizations like this to exist, so that we don't have to be rescuing animals out of labs because they're not being used anymore.
Mhm. Yeah. What do you think the awareness level is for the general population around animal testing? Like, what do you think people know about?
I think most people know very little about what goes on inside of a lab, and we've done a lot of undercover work and undercover videos, and we're coming out with an expose on some animals used in the lab, because they don't realize what actually happens, or they don't want to think about it. And so, not only are we trying to expose what happens, but we're also trying to provide alternatives. For example, we have our Cruelty Cutter app, which is an app you can download on your phone, and it lists, organic companies, beauty, healthcare, all of these companies, and whether or not they test on animals. So it's an easy way for the public to, make good choices so that the products they're using are not tested on animals.
Yeah. Why do they test on animals? Like, what is the purpose of that?
I think obviously it's to mitigate the negative effects of products so that they don't harm humans whenever they are tested on humans, or go through that type of testing before they're approved to be used. But I think science is slowly catching up to the fact that most of these products that pass animal testing fail in human trials. I've seen statistics anywhere from like 90% to 95% of drugs and products that are tested on animals fail when they get to human testing. So to me, that's a flawed model, and it's not working. And how many thousands of animals have to suffer before we recognize that we've got to do better?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. Because, when you say, obviously, your job is to not have a job, your goal is to not have a job and to end animal testing, I think it would pose the question, okay, like if animal testing didn't exist, then how would you know certain products were safe? But as you're saying, like if the evidence shows that it actually is not an effective way to test the efficacy of a product, then why is it even happening?
Yeah, and I think, good examples of that, like aspirin. Aspirin, can be fatal in animals, but we've been using that for hundreds of years before there was the, official testing. So we wouldn't have some drugs now, like chocolate. Chocolate's toxic to dogs. So if they had done any type of testing on that, humans wouldn't be eating chocolate. And that's a tragedy in and of itself. If we didn't have chocolate.
It's a good soapbox to stand on.
Yeah.
So I imagine, as you are aware of the cruelty that exists in these systems, that it does take a certain level of resilience to be able to stay in the work, to continue to show up day after day. I always ask people, first, how do you define resilience? If you could come up with your own definition of it, how would you define it?
Oh gosh, resilience is I think seeing the big picture and recognizing that there's going to be setbacks with anybody's line of work, things that, are going to push you back, but just recognizing the big picture so that you can continue to move forward, I think to me is resilience.
Yeah. Now, the Beagle Freedom Project kind of operates on a macro system level. As you know, like you said, there's the education, the legislation, and the liberation part of it. And I'm wondering what resilience looks like when you're fighting like policy battles. Like, how does that process look like? Because I'm sure it's not easy. I'm sure you don't just like walk up and say, "We want this change," and they're like, "No problem."
Yeah.
What does that look like?
It's very frustrating, or it can be very frustrating. Um, you know, we depending on where you're wanting laws passed, it can be very challenging. I know, before I came to Beagle Freedom Project, I worked with organizations to try to pass laws in Texas against the owning of exotic animals. Because to me, owning a tiger or a chimpanzee is not a good idea. But we could never get anywhere in Texas. And it's very frustrating that this isn't common sense in certain areas. So you can't stop. You have to keep fighting. You have to keep educating people so that they understand why you're wanting to get laws changed. Beagle Freedom Project has passed the Beagle Freedom Bill in, I believe, 17 states. And basically, that just tells the labs that once they are done with their study, if the animal is healthy and deemed healthy by a veterinarian, then they need to reach out to shelters and get them out of the labs and find homes. This bill does not, ban them from doing testing. This just requires that healthy animals get out and they're not killed to make room for new ones that are coming in for a study. And so, that's what we have to look at is we've passed that in 17 states. We'll just keep that momentum going and recognizing that when legislators see that this bill has been successful in other areas, hopefully that will encourage them to sponsor and pass these bills in their state.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that's some of the um, reflection that kind of helps you stay resilient or
Mhm.
stay focused is that you recognize the successes, even if there's setbacks at times, and stay
Yes.
focused on the overall mission.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And since the passing of this bill in the 17 states, what have you guys noticed? Is there data on that? Like as far as like what animals, like the percentage of animals that actually end up making it out and getting into homes? Like I'm guessing you track this in some way.
Well, unfortunately, we don't know the numbers. We don't know how many animals are being tested on by X, Y, or Z lab. So it's really just, you know, assuming that the labs are doing the right thing and following the law
Mhm.
and deeming that the animals are healthy and that can come out. So, definitely that helps. We're not even saying that they have to come to us. They're just saying they need to go to a reputable no-kill shelter. But we are happy to work with any labs that want us to take their animals. We have a huge network of volunteers and fosterers that will get these animals out and get them in foster until they can be adopted. So there is not an issue of there being not enough space for these animals to be placed. So
Mhm.
we're hopeful that labs will do the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you find that I mean, I'm sure some labs are more agreeable than others in certain ways, but do you find that there are labs that are happy to collaborate and happy to get the animals placed into homes?
Yes, yes, and we'll see them go to other sanctuary or not sanctuaries, but other shelters, and we reach out to we have what we call the shelter safeguard program, where we reach out to shelters all across the country, specifically those that are near labs, and say, if a lab contacts you to take animals, we are here to help. We have resources. We have, adoption guides. We know how these animals are affected by being in the lab. We can help make the transition easier. Please reach out to us, or we'll take the animals and find them homes ourselves. So we're trying to build those relationships with the local shelters as well.
Awesome. Yeah. And this is obviously a nationwide organization. So and you have a large pool of volunteers and connections. How has that been built over the time? Like, is that just through people stumbling upon the work? Do people seek it out? Are you guys out doing a lot of outreach? Like, how does that community get built?
We do a lot of social media presence, a lot of notifications on social media. We have emails that go out to our supporters, letting them know what we're doing. We have volunteers that will do tabling events at local festivals or, animal expos, those type of things. So we're constantly trying to get the word out about who we are and what we do. And we have a large volunteer and, like I said, foster network as well too. And so they're spreading the word as well.
That's awesome. Are there states that seem to have more testing activity than other states? And are there states that you're hoping to make more ground in?
Yes, we're focusing on several states this legislative session. We're forecasting into, the next year's legislative session. So we've identified key states that we want to focus on, and trying to build relationships with local legislators to support our bill.
Awesome. Yeah. Now, for yourself personally, um, how do you, I guess, kind of cope with some of the information that you're aware of? Like, how do you personally stay resilient? How do you manage any of the grief that you might experience and things that, again, you're aware of and you experience in this field of work?
Yeah, so compassion fatigue is a huge problem in this industry. People are, they need to know how to cope with loss, with setbacks, and unfortunately, it can happen quite a bit in the sanctuary world, excuse me, and in rescue. And so, it's something that I've worked with over the past 20 years when I was running sanctuaries, and even now is making sure that people that are coming into this industry are aware of it so that they can monitor themselves and recognize that you have to be able to distance yourself back when it's time. You can't take all of this personally, and you have to be able to grieve, especially when you're talking about losses of animals, that are having to be euthanized because they're at the end of their life cycle, or they just it's time for them to move on, and so you have to deal with those types of losses. um, yeah, I think I've offered training seminars to my teams before, to help them with the training so that they can recognize it themselves. And I think the biggest thing is recognizing that you're not going to solve this by yourself. You are not ultimately responsible for making sure those animals live. You will do your best, but it is not that world. That weight of that world is not on your shoulders. And I think that's huge. I've seen, myself included, seen people work 60-hour weeks for years because they just can't stop. There's just that one more thing they have to do, and they have to recognize that that's not realistic, and it's not life sustaining. You can't continue to do that, or you're going to burn out and you're going to leave the industry. So that's what I try to educate people that are coming into this field, so that they recognize those triggers and those symptoms.
Yeah. It sounds like you're aware from just firsthand experience to just what that has felt like in the past and what you've had to do personally to kind of build some boundaries, it sounds like, to kind of take care of yourself.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, yeah. How did you know when you were burnt out? Like, what were your symptoms? How did you know that I need to take a step back?
I don't know that I ever got to the point where I was burnt out.
Mhm.
Definitely recognized that I was putting too much in and I needed to take a step back. Specifically, working in sanctuaries, I was living on property at the time, and it was like my day never ended. I was always worried about animals that were there, and, oh, the temperatures are going to be low tonight. Do we have enough heat for them? All of that kind of stuff, and it just never stopped. So I think for me, I had to move off property when I was living at a sanctuary, and I had to set boundaries for myself so that I recognize that I have a staff that is very capable and they can do this. They don't need me to tell them to check this or check that because they've been trained and they know our procedures and policies. And so setting up that framework and that infrastructure, I think, is crucial too. Again, so you realize you don't have to do it all. You have other people that can do it. So that's what I did for myself.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's such a valid point about, these sanctuaries and rescues where people, it's happening on their property and how hard it is probably to create that separation and, the importance of building up that support system and knowing that it's really an impossible endeavor to do it by yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. The sanctuary that you are referring to, was it a fairly large sanctuary or was it kind of small or what was?
I've worked at a few in Texas, and so they were fairly large. One had, at one time we had over 1,000 animals and 50 different species. I've worked at some wildlife rehab facilities that had, several hundred animals that were coming in, and then I've worked at a primate sanctuary in South Texas that took in primarily animals from biomedical research in the pet trade.
Yeah, gotcha. Is there one particular um, rescue or success that really stands out in your mind as something that has really impacted you throughout the years, or any story of resilience that really stands out?
Yeah, so there's actually a lot, but I would say the one of the top ones was we took in 20 Java macaques used in biomedical research that were rescued, or I believe the lab closed. This has been about 10 years ago, I think. No, about 15 years ago. The lab closed abruptly. I don't remember why. I don't know if it was USDA violations or what the reason was, but they have closed abruptly, and there was a group of sanctuaries that all pulled together to get these animals out so that they weren't killed. And we took in a group of about 10 to 20 of these Java macaques. And before they could even get them out, they still had their collars on, which for primates used in research, they put these metal collars around their neck. And then there's two holes on the side so they can take sticks and lift them out so that they can move the animal around. And they didn't even have a chance to sedate the animals to get these off of them. They just had to get them out quickly. So taking in these macaques who I can only imagine the trauma that they're dealing with. And then, being able to perform exams on them and get baseline blood draws and then taking these horrible collars off of them and then just watching them thrive. When we would get monkeys in from that were used in research, their skin was very pale because they hadn't seen the sun. They were always very thin because they, have a very controlled diet. And so seeing them flourish and thrive after that, we put them in large multi-acre habitats with grass and trees and let them live in family groups. And then watching them, thrive, their skin got tan, their coats, looked very normal. They put on some weight. They were running, climbing in trees, grooming each other, and not paying humans the slightest bit of difference. They could care less about us, which normally when you're dealing with wild animals in captivity, they're very reactive and they view you as a threat. And so having these monkeys just be like, yeah, whatever, we're happy now. And I'm putting words into their mouths, and anthropomorphizing, but just seeing that was so rewarding because we got to see these animals that had, God knows what had been done to them, being able to live as close to a life in the wild as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. What do these lab survivors seemingly teach humans about healing, or what do you feel like you've been taught about healing from these survivors?
I think resilience is a perfect word, like what you said earlier. I mean, animals are so much more forgiving than we are. I've never seen an animal hold a grudge. They come out there. It depends on the animal too. I've seen some animals that come out and they're just happy, happy beagles and just playing and running and running. And then there's some that are so scared to come out of their crate. It takes them a while, and they're very fearful of humans. They don't know how to walk on a leash. They don't know, some of them are not housebroken. They just kind of have to learn all the skills, but they do it without feeling sorry for themselves or without, holding a grudge. And it's just amazing that these animals are now in wonderful homes. And we get pictures all the time from our adoptive families. And it's just so rewarding to see this beagle passed out on a couch, with his brother or sister or, the kids in the family, and just giving this animal exactly what they deserve.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Hmm.
It's going to be incredibly rewarding. And I know that, in the conversations I've had in the past with others, right, really getting to have those follow-up stories really just continues to make it all worthwhile to know that you're making an
Exactly.
impact.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You were talking about, I know you were talking about the primates in the one example, but it really, to imagine these animals that, they just never really see the sunlight, right? I mean, that's just
Mhm.
such a sad thing to imagine. And so, like, if we're talking about beagles, for example, like, what are the conditions of a lab typically? Like, what do they get exposed to versus what don't they get exposed to? What's their environment?
And I would imagine that labs do it differently, so I can't speak to every one. But
Mhm.
from what I've seen, whether it be undercover videos or firsthand accounts from staff that have worked there, basically it's very sterile, very cold. Obviously there's a lot of chemicals that they're keeping everything clean. The animals usually are on a raised surface so that when they poop or pee, it just falls right through. But all the time, it doesn't always fall through. And so the dogs are walking in it. Sometimes they get urine scald from that, or irritation. And then there's a lot of noise, a lot of barking, a lot of banging, a lot of high stress noise.
Yeah,
So that's what I've seen personally from undercover footage and from firsthand accounts.
absolutely. Yeah. Now, this undercover aspect of it, obviously, that's a different arm of the organization. Who are the people who do this work? Like, how do they come into it? Are they from like a law enforcement background? Um, yeah, I guess I'm just curious about that part.
Yeah, I think it may depend. And, obviously we can't talk a whole lot
Yeah.
about our undercover work, but from what I've seen and what I've spoken to a lot of people is people go into working in these labs because they want to care for the animals, or they go into it thinking that, I may not like animal testing, but it's necessary. And so I'm going to give them the best quality of care that I can. And I think that's admirable. But at the same time, a lot of times they see that things are not changing, or they're not doing the things the way they feel they should be done. And so sometimes they will reach out to, whether it be Beagle Freedom Project or other organizations that are doing the same work, and say, this is not right. I want to help them. And then perhaps become undercover, uh, filming and, that sort of thing
Yeah.
is what I've seen. And then I've worked with a lot of people that started off in labs and realized this was not for what they wanted to. They did not sign up for this. And so they've left, and now they are speaking out against this and, becoming advocates, saying this isn't right. We have to do better.
Thank you. And I, yeah, appreciate the sensitivity of it, but appreciate you kind of talking a little bit about that. I think, you know, in my world as a mental health therapist, I've worked in different types, inpatient, outpatient, private practice, community, all these kind of things. And I think sometimes when you hear a lot or see a lot, you can become desensitized to something that probably we shouldn't get desensitized to.
Absolutely.
Um, how do you prevent that desensitization, or do you feel like it's possible to do that?
That's an amazing question. And I struggle with that because I think some of us are desensitized to loss. And I think that's a coping mechanism. And I don't know if that's good or bad. I would probably have to speak with a therapist about that because, working in wildlife rehab, there's a lot of loss. You're dealing with animals that just aren't going to make it. They were hit by a car, their mother was killed. And so we've got these tiny babies that just can't survive, that sort of thing. And then obviously dealing in a sanctuary, I always say we're kind of the hospice. These animals come and they live out their lives for whatever time they have left. And our goal is to provide them the best life possible. But ultimately, they're going to pass on. And so there's a lot of loss that you have to deal with. And I think for me, I view it as somewhat healthy that you have to be able to desensitize yourself to it. Otherwise, you're going to be hysterically sobbing every time you lose an animal. So I think there's coping mechanisms to desensitize yourself with that kind of thing. But you have to make sure that it doesn't cross over to the compassion fatigue where you're actually numb because you can't feel anything anymore.
Yeah.
So I always, in my personal life, if I can, if I lose my own pet, that's one thing. It's okay to be hysterically sobbing because you lose your dog. So as long as I can balance that, then I feel that I'm doing okay. I don't
Yes.
know if that was the answer to your question or not, but
There,
yeah, that's
I don't think there's a singular answer to it,
yeah,
but
yeah,
I think that that's a fair measure, right? That am I still able to feel deeply when it's important and necessary while also
hmm
still having these emotional boundaries to help me stay present in the work that
yeah,
I'm doing. Yeah,
yeah. That was a good way to sum it up.
that's why I get paid the big bucks. Yeah. um, so, as a director of operations, what strategies do you feel like you guys are employing to support sustainability in the work that you guys are doing? I know I heard you say that you run some trainings with staff around compassion fatigue. Are there things that you've had to adapt strategies for if progress is stalling in certain areas? Like, tell me how your job has evolved and how it impacts the organization.
So yeah, I think my role is a little bit different because um, operationally, I'm making sure that the wheels are spinning. That's managing our fundraising team to make sure that we have revenue coming in to support the work that we're doing, making sure our staff feel supported so that they have the tools they need to do their job so that they can continue to fight the big fight, making sure our sanctuary staff have the animal care tools, making sure that if we're getting requests in, overseeing, our rescue department, which, most of these departments run autonomously. They handle their own workload, but obviously I'm here if something out of the ordinary comes up, like, oh, we just got this request for X amount of animals. Let's strategize and figure out a way we can find placement for them, that kind of stuff. So I consider myself kind of behind the scenes so that we can make sure that everything's running smoothly. Shannon, our founder and president, she's really our driving force with the campaigning and the legislation and all that kind of stuff. And she's amazing to watch because she really gets in there and we get these bills passed mainly because of her and our
Mm,
campaigns team. They do such an amazing job.
yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, so over the time, it sounds like these systems have really grown into their own. There,
Yep.
it's a fine-tuned machine and strong leadership, just kind of helping it along
Yeah.
ultimately. Yeah,
Yep. Absolutely.
that's great. As a leader, how much responsibility do you feel like you put on yourself for uh, feeling like things are successful? How do you define success ultimately?
I think the fact that we keep going, we're still going strong, we're still growing after 15 years. I think that's how we measure success. We're still rescuing animals. We're still educating the public. We have education programs for schools too, where we'll go into schools and talk to them about who we are, what we do, and how kids can make better choices. Having them download our Cruelty Cutter app so that they can start looking up. Oh, mom, you shouldn't buy this dish soap because they test on animals. Just educating the next generation, I think, is extremely important as well. So, all of our departments are still running smoothly, still succeeding, still advancing. So that's how I measure success.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you've mentioned some of the resources that you guys are active in providing to the public. So you're in classrooms, you've got an app. Your website is robust. I know there's a lot of information on that. So when people are trying to get more information, do you suggest that they go directly to the website and learn more information, or how do people actually find out more about what you guys are doing, or how do they get more
Yeah,
educated?
absolutely. I think our website's a great place to start. It's just bfp.org, Beagle Freedom Project, just the initials. And we have information on animal testing, on ways you can make a difference, on, if you want to adopt an animal, we have our adoptable animals on the website. If you want to volunteer, there's lots of information on there as well for all areas of what we do. You can also reach out to us. There's a contact us button. Send us an email, ask us a question, give us a call. Our phone number's on there. We're happy to talk to anybody that needs more information or wants to help.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I have maybe just two more questions, maybe. Uh, one is people getting started in this work, whether it is through volunteering or fostering or getting into more of this legislation part of it, like what are some words of wisdom that you'd like to pass on to people thinking about that?
If you want to get into this work as far as like a career choice, I always suggest volunteering or interning first. We're working on creating our own intern program within the next year or so, whether that be on site at our sanctuary or helping out with legislative issues. I think that's a great way, especially for people that have just graduated from college or they've in between college, high school and college, and they're trying to figure out what they want to do. I think internships are a great way to do it. Volunteering is always helpful, not only for the volunteer, but also for the organization. And then, yeah, obviously, if you want to help by rescuing an animal, reach out to us or another adoptive organization and adopt an animal, because that helps tremendously, not only for the organization, but for that specific animal.
Yes,
So, yeah, yeah, highly
absolutely.
recommend that.
Yeah. And then as far as organizations that are doing similar work, as far as working on trying to get the animal testing eliminated ultimately. Are there multiple organizations doing this? How prevalent are they? What does that world look like?
Oh, yes, there is a whole family of animal welfare organizations that are trying to end animal exploitation, whether that's animals in labs, whether that's the exotic pet trade, whether that's, your local humane society that's trying to, just get animals from hoarding cases adopted. So it really just depends on what atrocity you're looking at, because unfortunately there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
I feel like we are the leaders in the getting animals out of labs and getting them in homes. But obviously there's a lot of wildlife that are used in animal testing. So there's a need for sanctuaries, legitimate sanctuaries across the United States to take in these animals too. And so I think to be a successful animal welfare organization, you have to recognize that, again, you can't do it all, and you have to network with other like-minded organizations to get the job done.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That is also a common thread I'm hearing in organizations, small and large, is that the network is necessary. You have to
Hmm.
have it. And like you
Yeah.
said, you can't do it alone. And the collaboration is the thing that really makes all the work successful.
Yeah.
So I know you mentioned the website. You've got your Cruelty Cutter app, and that's available on iOS and Android, I'm
And
guessing.
Android. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Easy to download, free. And you can also help too that if there's a product in there, you can scan a barcode and it'll pull up automatically. Yes, it's tested on animals. No, this is a good company. Or there's a few out there that we're still collecting data on. So you can help by scanning products. And if we don't know about this product, we can do the research, and that helps us know that specific products are out there. So you can help as well by expanding that
Yeah,
that
that's really
database.
interesting. So you obviously have a whole team dedicated to that side of
Yes.
the
Yeah.
organization as well. Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, so if people are feeling compelled to support the Beagle Freedom Project in any way, how could they do that?
We have a number of ways. Obviously, monetary donations are always appreciated. That's bfp.org/donate. We also have an Amazon wish list for our rescue team and our on-site sanctuary if you want to donate supplies. Volunteer your time. There's lots of ways to support the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And just real quick, it's just popping in my mind, and maybe there's not a good answer for it, but are there pockets in the US where you're looking for more support in? Like, are there?
That's a good question. And I don't know that I have the answer
Okay.
to that one, because we have volunteers and foster people all over the US, but that's a good question. I can find out if you want to know, but I'm not sure where the gaps are
Sure.
across the US.
Yeah, just kind of curious if
Mhm.
there's areas where you're seeing more need and looking for more support. So,
Mhm.
great. Well, Noelle, I really appreciate your time and your educating me and the listeners about what you guys are up to at the Beagle Freedom Project, and just as a whole, what's happening around our nation and the work that you guys are doing to support the ending of animal testing. So thank you for that. And thank you to that team that you are leading. And yeah, just really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate this opportunity to expand on the work that we're doing. So thank you for giving us that platform.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you again to Noelle Almrud of Beagle Freedom Project for sharing her story. If you were moved by this episode, share with a friend, follow us on Instagram at animal.rescuehub, and leave a review. Until next time, may we all find our own tale of resilience.
Thanks for joining us on Tales of Resilience. If today's story moved you, reminded you of your own path, or gave you something to think about, please consider sharing this episode with someone else who cares. You can follow us on Instagram at zodi.paws and animal.rescuehub to stay connected, or visit zodipaws.com or animalrescuehub.org to learn more about both of these organizations. And you can also email us directly at info@animalrescuehub.org. And if you or someone you know has a story worth sharing, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, be kind to yourself and never underestimate the power of a tale and a little resilience.